Hi and welcome to the Process Diary work in progress video for February 2010. This video is the second in the modeling part of the series. In this video we'll be modeling the boots and the hands of this character. Okay, so the first part of the model that we're going to work on is the boot area. That'll be the fastest thing to do, and I'm not going to be using a background reference image for this because I'm still roughing out the boots in this case. But they're not that difficult to do. As we see here, our character is still got a mirror modifier on one half of it, and we only need to work on this area. So the first thing I'm going to do here is go into front view, select all the vertices that I will be needing to look at. Then I'm going to select swap and hide. So I'm only going to focus in on the area that is necessary for me to work on. Alrighty, so first up, let's just start to tidy up a little bit of this mesh. Now already we've got the basic shin down. We've got a bit of the knee area here. So if we were to go around the side over here, we could definitely see that that our knee area is already nice and shaped pretty well. Behind the knee definitely needs to go in a little bit more. But of course, this is always better revised in detail when we're in when we're in subsurf mode. So I won't make too much of a big deal of this, just enough to get some of that shapeliness that we like, or that I like in my figures, and that is this sort of lovely bent shin that goes down to the foot area. Okay. Probably need a little bit more detail here in the shin to start bringing that in, and to continue that nice curve. Let's see what it looks like in the front view. Definitely want it to go in here. It's a little severe, and it's always good to check the mirror side so that you can almost see what it looks like without the vertices over it, so you don't have to keep toggling in and out of edit mode. It's one great thing about the mirror modifier. Now already we can see that these two rows of faces here will definitely end up being extruded out to be the top of the foot. Now as we come down to the ankle over here, so a little bit of anatomy knowledge does come in handy. But I'm going to first focus on the top, because this is the bit that we all sort of know how that goes. So I'm going to extrude these edges out. Knowing sort of what's going to happen. And that's around about where we get our toe, and I'll just sort of leave it at that. Go into top view here. Already sort of see how this boot is going to shape up. And front view is looking nice. And we can always just go back and modify the vertices that we don't quite need just yet. Okay, and now of course this is going to be part of the foot over on the side here. Just going to edge mode, so I can just select twice and face, go back into vertice mode, and we can see that already probably going to have to start folding down around here. Cool. So that's going to be sort of where the top of the foot is. It'll probably be a good idea to extrude one more and rotate that down, because that's going to be our toe cap, obviously. But the more consistent we can be with our edge loops, the better the model will look, especially in subsurf mode. Probably be a line drawing back along there. Now, since I'm working on faces, we will definitely not be needing these. And this is probably a good point to, with the exception of that one, extrude down the heel. Now, if you ever want to get something flush, especially in sort of absolute directions like Z, X, or Y, you just hit the S key to start scaling. You hit the Z key to constrain, and you'll see that there's a blue line around here. And then you hit a number. In this case, if you go 0, it's going to zero in the scale based on the average of these vertices here. This is because I've got it in median point on the pivot. Now, another way of doing it, I'll just undo this to show you. Another way which I sometimes use is select pivot on 3D cursor, place the 3D cursor where I want the scale to go to, select S or hit S, hit Z, and when I hit 0, the 0 point is at the cursor. So, but of course, that's not what I want. I just wanted to show you that quickly. That's exactly sort of what I wanted, because as soon as we start getting this flush thing here, then we can extrude the bottom of the shoe. And we all already know that this is going to be a face over here. This probably won't be a face yet. This will probably be the side of the shoe, and so it might be a good idea to begin to extrude out the rest of the shape of that boot. So now we know that these faces here will correspond, these faces here will correspond. Kind of odd that in top view this looks okay, but in side view it doesn't look that great. That's why it's a little bit lower than this. I'm just going to go into side view here. We want to drop these vertices down to be sort of along here. Let's close off that part of the loop there. Getting into all sorts of trouble here right now. Especially around the toe area. What I might do is might take out mirror just in edit mode. If you take a look down here at the modifier settings, you've got these 3 buttons next to your modifiers, which means that you can enable it in, by default they're all enabled, but this just means that it'll only be enabled during render mode, this during interactive display, and this during edit mode. Now if I click on this, it means that I can edit this, and by holding down my control key when I go into side view, which is numpad 3, I can take a look at the opposite side of the boot. In this case, it's the inside angle of the boot. And I can begin to sort of really get in there and move these vertices to where I need them to be in this particular view that I've got. I know I'm not going to be happy with this row right now. I think these vertices are kind of wrong because as you can see here, we've got this loop coming down here and then crossing over there, but we've got no real corresponding thing here unless we take these 2 vertices here and begin to extrude along the y-axis, which is sort of what we want to do. Now, is this going to be a face, or is this going to... I'm going to end up with a triangle here for some reason. No, we're not. Closing off that face, and that face. Looks a little bit wonky right now, but I learnt a pretty neat trick on another tutorial. Even when we're modeling around here, get out of edit mode for a second and jump into sculpt mode. Okay, I'm going to hit my N key to bring up my sculpting properties, and I'm going to select grab. Here is my grab brush. I can actually use my sculpting tool to finesse my model. Now, of course, I haven't hidden the rest of the vertices, so I might get the mirror out of object select mode. If I go into edit mode, I can use my editing tools like this, and if I jump out of edit mode, I'm automatically in sculpting mode again, which is really handy if you just want to, say, push some vertices around, or maybe enact a smoothing tool, which is probably good for around the toe area. Of course, you can adjust the strength and all that sort of stuff while you're in there. And I found that this method very quickly allows me to adjust the vertices to work as I want them. So I'm going to go back into edit mode, because this boot here is almost there. I have to scale in this toe. I have to move this up because there's going to be that familiar bump. It's going to have fairly wide feet, this character. Make all of those flush. Scale them in a little bit. We've got the beginnings of our boot shape. Now he is looking a little bit Frankenstein's monster, but this is sort of how I want this character to... Well, he's not an idiot or anything like that, but I do want him to be sort of chunky and sort of fairly robust, if you know what I mean. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to just take a look at what I've got here for the sole area, and I'm thinking that the number of vertices should correspond. Because I'm going to cap this off here before I actually add the sole. By using that, I can then extrude faces instead of just individual vertices. And what I want to do is pick 1, 2, 3. Let's start with that area there and see if we can go around, get a fairly even... That's a face there. I think we're doing quite well. Let's go into edge mode. Face, and beautiful. So that gives us a nicely looped sole. Now, what I was getting at before was if I now go into face mode, select these faces here, extrusion becomes a piece of cake, and we can extrude out the sole part there. Going back into edge select mode, we can now add details such as let's get a loop here and a loop here. I'll go edge select, scale this out, move this up, and this is how we can get a nice sort of a thicker sole by selecting one of the edges just with one click. Control E brings up our Edge Specials menu, especially if you're in 2.49, sorry. Edge Loop Select selects the loop around. Now we've got this consistent loop here, and now we can just move this loop down. And for now, that's pretty much our boot done. I'll just re-enable. Now, hands can be tricky. The best way to begin hands that I've always thought is with the fingers, but there is something that you have to understand about keeping edge loops consistent. Now I'll just sort of make a note here so that you sort of understand where we're coming from. Now the wrist, if we take a look at our wrist here, we need to count the number of vertices here and sort of keep this in mind as we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 vertices around gives us, let's see, this could probably support maybe 3 fingers. So we'd probably have to have 12 vertices around this particular circle to extend out a hand that has got consistent edge loops. You'll see why when we get there, but I'm thinking of, I'm going to detail the rest of this low poly mesh once we get the hand model, because that's sort of the tough bit. So the way I'm going to do this is by modeling it separate to the body and then stitching it onto the wrist. We could just work on the body here, but I'm just going to make this a separate object just so that we can work on the hand solo and, if need be, even not have the body showing at all. I'm just going into top view here, and I'm going to add a cube. I shrink it down to maybe what the thickness of that finger will be. I like to start with the fingers. It's something that it's just a habit. Some people like to start with the palm and then extrude out from the palm. I kind of like to work the other way. Again, as usual with my tutorials, there's no one way of doing things. I just sort of happen to like doing things in a certain way. I've extruded each joint out. I'm not going to add the detail just yet, and that's sort of our basic finger. I'm going to go into face select mode. Now the way I toggle between these modes is by holding down Control and then hitting Tab, and then I get this pop-up menu. You could even just go down to the bottom of the 3D screen and toggle between the modes, but I just sort of like my shortcuts. And I'm going to delete that face because obviously that's where everything else is going to get attached. Okay, I'm going to go into vertex mode. I'm going to move this sort of into position so that if we could imagine the wrist, the thumb would be here, the fingers might sort of be around here. Okay. I'm aiming for something that kind of looks like workman's hands. What I'm doing here to add detail is hitting the K key by itself to bring up my loop cut menu, and I'm just going to do a loop cut instead of sort of any of the other notions options there. And I'm just adding one loop cut on either side of the knuckle joint. I'm going to border select those vertices there, and I'm just going to move them up so that we can see what the individual joints look like. Now, this hand is very simply modeled. This box modeling will sort of give us the overall look of the hand, I guess. Fingers are probably the one case where I won't model exactly. I mean, remember when we were talking about putting characters into a T-pose, fingers you could say model straight out if you wanted to, and then revise it at rigging stage. But fingers are the one case that I kind of want to model in a semi-relaxed pose. The reason being is that they're going to be rigged with IKs. And one thing I've known when we get to the rigging stage, you'll notice is IKs like a relaxed pose. If I make a row of an IK chain here and it's bent slightly in this direction, I put on my end effector and then throw back an IK chain along this. If I grab my end effector, it's going to automatically want to bend in this way. If I've got it straight, it can bend either way. And this is sort of modeling in a little bit of bias, if you will, in the model, which will aid in the overall rigging stage, I guess. Alright, so if I'm looking at that, very basic finger. It's exactly sort of where I'm going with it. It's not any extra information along the sides here, but we will be sort of adding a little bit of extra information as we go along, but not quite at this stage. That's my first finger. I'm going to select all of those, and I'm going to duplicate those. I'm going to move those up. That will be my middle finger. Now, I could have actually gone the other way, but seeing that I'm here now, I'm going to select this finger here. I'm going to select one vertex, and I'm going to hit my L key, which will select all of the linked vertices. See, because these two things are split, this is a quick way of just selecting, say, this finger here. I'm going to rotate it slightly. No, first I'm going to scale, and I'm going to scale this down about 10%, so we get to 0.9 on the scale here. And move this back. I'm going to rotate it slightly. Let's say about 5 degrees. Okay, I'm going to put this back around here. I'm going to duplicate this, grab in the Y direction, that's G, and then Y. I'm going to rotate this out 10 degrees, so it's almost a mirror. And I'm going to do this one more time. Duplicate, Shift D, G key to grab, Y, and I move this out. Rotate that another 5 degrees and put it into position. Scale it down 10% again. I'm thinking the scales are a little bit off. Let's take a look at it in side view. No, actually, they're not too bad. No, they're actually going to look quite good. These are my 4 fingers. All done. Last thing I'm going to do is, well, I won't get into modeling the thumb just yet. No, actually, it's probably a good idea if I duplicate that and move this aside, rotating this out 85, rotating this down. No, actually, let's undo that. Go into front view, rotate this around because it's an opposable thumb. Is it exactly 90 degrees? I don't think it's exactly 90 degrees. I'm going to go with maybe 60 degrees and move this down here. And just sort of move this out of the way. It's not going to be exact just yet because we've got a little bit of work to do around here. And that is in merging these vertices. Now, if I wanted a really highly detailed hand, I would probably put in a face in between each of these fingers. But what we're going to end up getting is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times 2, 16, and then any extra detail, let's say 2. 18 vertices around, which will have to link up with the wrist here for 18. And so what we want to do is minimize the amount of vertices going back. Keep in mind that this is going to be a very cartoon-like character. So what I'm going to do is actually going to merge these right here at the finger joint. I'm going to select 2 vertices here, hit my W key, go down to merge, and I'm going to select at center. Removes one vertice, at center. And I'm going to go ahead and do that for all of these points here. Always merging at the center. Alrighty. Now, selecting all of these vertices here, and making sure that only the vertices get extruded. Extrude only edges. Well, let's start with only edges, but we're going to have a problem right away, and that is that it extrudes these edges inside. So going into edge select mode, I'm going to select those 3 edges and immediately remove them. So we get that space. Selecting one edge, Control E brings up my edge specials menu, and I hit edge loop select, and that loop is selected, which allows me now to extrude out a palm. It's a very basic palm, but I'm just going to extrude out just what I need right now, and already you can start seeing how this is already building up. We can also see where this thumb can attach on. Now looking at my own thumb, I'm looking at the joints here, and it's little strange how this joins on here, this is going to have to get pretty wide. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to scale down this thumb so it's a little bit more squat. I'm going to rotate it around. And I'm going to position some of these vertices roughly in the area that they need to be in. So in side view, this is going to have to go right up here. It's probably going to have to go around here. In top view, it's going to have to be closer to here. It might be a good idea to edit these knuckle joints just a little bit. Probably have to go back in and take a good look at the thumb eventually. Going to face mode now. I'm going to just begin to rough out the hand because the palm is definitely going to have to be a little bit more chunkier. But first of all, I'm just going to count how many vertices we've got around this edge, and then I'm going to count how many vertices we've got on this wrist here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We've got 10 vertices there. Okay, get out of edit mode, go into edit mode over here, and let's count up these vertices. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Well, we've managed to fluke it. We've actually got 10 vertices on the edge of this palm here and 10 vertices to attach here. And so any extra information that we'll have to add, I think we might do it at the finessing stage. So why don't we go ahead and model this hand to get it perfect and then stitch it onto the body, and then we'll leave it at that for this tutorial, or this section of the tutorial series. Okay, removing this face here will now give us a nice hole to merge the vertices of the thumb to the palm. And now all we have to do is just start massaging the rest of the vertices. Now that thumb looks freaking enormous in comparison to the rest of the hand. But now we just start massaging the vertices, sometimes one by one. We could probably go into sculpt mode at some point if necessary. So we've got this knuckle joint here, which is really nice. Thumb's always a tricky one. We've got this bulge is starting to happen here. This is there's always a tricky part for me, getting this bulge right here. But when you're working with just a basic structure of the hand, just get it close, and then you can just massage away once you're in the detailing stage of your modeling. So I'm just going to bump up the hand over here, bump the hand over here. Now this wrist section here is going to have to start looking a little bit more rounded, so that when we get it attached to the wrist, it's going to attach a little better. We might extrude one more edge ring from here in the X direction, scaling it a little bit in the Z and sort of shifting it down here. And at this point, while we've got this rough hand, get out of edit mode, shift select this one here, because what's going to happen is this is going to join onto here and is going to adopt the mirror modifier of this mesh. See if we can show it here. Control J, join selected meshes, and voila, we've got a hand over here. It's very disproportionate right now, but because it's still a separate mesh, it means that we can go in, select one vertice, hit L, scale this hand up a little bit, and just start to stitch these together. Now, if I go into edge select mode, I select an edge ring by selecting the edge on the edge of the hand here, edge loop, shift select this edge here, Control E, edge loop, and hit my F key to do faces. In my make faces menu, skin face edge loops is going to make my job one hell of a lot easier, but it's also going to make things look a little bit wonky to begin with. Blender will go ahead and stitch to the best of its knowledge the corresponding vertices. Now, if you don't like how it stitches it together initially, which is probably being very honest. I use that word a lot when I model honest for some reason. You can always undo that and get the vertices lined up the way that you think might work better. But for now, I think it's doing the job pretty well. I'm going to select all. I'm going to hit Control N to recalculate any normals, and I'm going to hit Set Solid so that these things work well. Going back into Edit mode and selecting this edge ring here, I can go into my Mesh tools and hit Smooth, or I can select all of these edge rings together and smooth these out a little bit. And Blender will do much of the work for me. Just hit this a couple more times perhaps. Let's select this edge loop as well and smooth this out just a couple of times, and perhaps even this edge loop, and see what, that's sort of looking okay. Ruining a little bit of my work here, but there we've got a pretty decent low poly hand on the end of that. Now it's looking a little bit bad, but no matter. Once we get our head modeled, our task will then be to finesse the rest of this low poly figure. So even though some proportions might be out, like the knee and the fingers might not look right, and so on and so forth, like right now I'm not liking this bicep shoulder area, and this is looking a little thin over here. When we go around to the finessing stage, that's where we'll be really taking a good hard look. But in terms of the basics, we've got a nice basic mesh to begin with, and we're off to a running start.